This is part 76 of ASP.NET MVC tutorial. In this video, we'll discuss validate input attribute in MVC. Validate input attribute is used to enable or disable request validation. By default, request validation is enabled in ASP.NET MVC and doesn't allow you to submit any HTML to prevent cross-site scripting attacks. Let's understand this with an example. Let's flip to Visual Studio. Here I have a blank ASP.NET MVC4 application. Let's add a controller and let's name it Home Controller. We already have an index action method here. Let's add index view. And we want to design this index view so that it looks like this. So let's get rid of the code and HTML that's already there. Let's use a div tag and set the style attribute. Let's set font family to Arial. Now, the first thing that I want here is this word comments, and that should be bolded. So let's use a bold tag. And then in the next line, we need a multi-line text box. And to generate a multi-line text box in MVC, we use text area HTML helper. And let's name this text area as comments. And then we need a submit button. So let's use two breaks and then input type equals submit, and value is also going to be submit. Alright, now when we click this submit button, we want to post the entered comments to the server. So we need a form tag, and to generate a form tag in HTML, we use begin form HTML helper. Now, for us to have the closing form tag auto-generated, let's wrap the call to begin form helper using a using code block. Alright, so let's build the solution, fire up a browser and navigate to the index action of the home controller. Okay, now when we enter comments here and then when we click submit, we need an action method that responds to the post operation. Now the index action method that's already here responds to the get request but not to the post request. So let's go ahead and include another action method, and then let's decorate this with HTTP post attribute. This attribute word is optional, so we can simply say HTTP post. And then, so the comments that we enter are going to be received by this index action method using this parameter. And let's change the return type of this index action method to string, and let's return a string. So all this action method does is it receives the comments, whatever comments the user has entered, and it's going to return those comments along concatenated with this word your comments, and that will be displayed back on the screen. Alright, so let's go ahead and build this solution. Now if I enter this word hello and then once I click submit, look at that, it works as expected, your comments and hello. Now let's say I want this word hello to be bolded, so let's go ahead and wrap that inside a bold tag. So here I'm trying to submit HTML. Let's click submit. Look at that, I get this error. A potentially dangerous request.form value was detected from the client. So why is this happening? That's because by default in ASP.NET MVC, request validation is turned on, and to prevent cross-site scripting attacks, it doesn't allow us to submit any HTML. Okay, we discussed cross-site scripting attack in parts 55 and 56 of this video series. So if you're new to cross-site scripting attacks, please watch those videos. But here we want to allow users to submit HTML as part of their comments. So how do we make that possible? all we need to do here is disable the request validation, and to disable the request validation, use validate input attribute. So let's decorate this action method with validate input attribute, and look at that, it has got one boolean parameter, enable validation. I'm going to pass false as the value for that parameter, which means disable request validation. Let's build the solution. Let's go back and then let's try to submit and see what's going to happen. Look at that, it has accepted the HTML that we submitted because we disabled request validation. So basically we use validate input attribute to enable or disable request validation. If you want to enable request validation back, you can either remove this attribute altogether, because the default is that request validation is enabled, or you can use the attribute and pass a value of true for that parameter. That's it for today. Thank you for listening. Have a great day.